get the build up and it falls short.
I don't think so.
See, I didn't buy it.
See, that's why. But
and I think it was a terrible casting with Nick Offerman.
I thought it was really good. I'd highly recommend it.
I fall way short there.
Wow. How the hell do you fall short there? I mean,
yeah.
Welcome to the Old Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
Good to see you, Dan.
Good to see you, man. We're back. We're a little late to this one, but we're gonna do a review on Civil War. Mike holding up now. Is that the 4K? The UH?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just kind of run down the tail of the tape here for a second. So, Civil War, not Captain America. That's a first look that we did a while back. So this came out April 12th. It's another A24 production. It's their most expensive production to date from what I saw.
Wow.
So they put a lot of money behind this in terms, as related to well, I mean, it's a theatrical release, so it was out in the theaters for how long?
It was
brief. It wasn't too long. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hour and 49 minutes, R-rated, directed by Alex Garland. Now, I wasn't really familiar with his work. I know you are because of like Ex Machina and 28 Days Later.
Speaking of Ex Machina,
can you remember that this is also an audio podcast?
Yeah, I know.
You just go like this and you don't describe what you do.
Well, you usually.
Oh, you want me to? Okay, so Mike is holding up the physical discs of the 28 Days Later, and Ex Machina. Who was the star in that again? I always forget.
Is she Alicia Vikander?
Yeah, I think that's right. Because when I look at that, I always think Emily Blunt for some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But anyways, so directed and written by Alex Garland.
Right. Now, 28 Days Later, he was just the writer on. His directorial debut was Ex Machina, which is real, and so is Dread, very much sci-fi. So
lose the bifocals.
Oh.
Mike with the specs still on. So, all right, let me run down the cast. You got Kirsten Dunst, Wagner, Moura, who many of you like me might know. He played Pablo Escobar in Narcos. He was great in that. Kaylee Spaney, who was also in the movie Priscilla fairly recently. Nick Offerman is in this, plays the president actually, and then Jesse Plemons, who we'll talk about. So and actually an uncredited role. To point that out, a budget of about 50 million. It's grossed over 120 million worldwide thus far.
Now, the older actor, did you mention his name?
Oh, no. I'm glad you said it. Stephen McKinley Henderson, who very well-known character actor.
Right. He's
great.
On the IMDb page, he's not listed.
He is listed. I thought the same thing. He's got a horrible IMDb profile pic.
You
can't even tell it's a person. It's so bad.
And what his name was Sammy? Sammy in this?
Right.
Yes.
Right. So give the very, very, very brief synopsis so we can dive into this.
Well, it's called Civil War. So we're already in the Civil War when it starts. And it's basically about this gang of reporters, press, Kirsten Dunst and the likes.
Probably wouldn't use the term gang, but okay.
No, but they're traveling to Washington, D.C., which is very dangerous during the Civil War, to interview the president without any kind of, appointment or plan. They're just going.
Right. That's the scoop they're after, is to get that interview with him. And the film starts off with Nick Offerman as the president
making a speech.
Yeah, and it's wild because you're sort of getting this behind the scenes look. He's kind of practicing the speech, and then he starts. They cut to him actually delivering the speech, and he's talking about different states that are seceding and things like that. So right away, as you said, like the kind of state that we're in at this point, and they say like set somewhere in the near future,
Yes. Yes.
Now, Garland wrote this in June of 2020.
Interesting.
So a lot of people might assume it was a much more recent,
Yes.
because it for many, I'm sure it seems to parallel a lot of the things that are going on in the country right now. But this was one of the things that I appreciated about it, and I do believe it's true. I felt this from my own viewing of it is the film doesn't take sides. It's not a
Right.
politicized film in that way.
Right.
It's just kind of these are, like you said, photojournalists covering this
Yes.
war.
And they are set on staying uninvolved, which is nearly impossible because they're traveling through, war zones basically,
Mhm.
right?
But that's their job. That's their job. In fact, Kirsten Dunst, she at one point says something to the effect of, if you're gonna sit there and start to analyze what you're watching, what you're observing in terms of the humanity and trying to get into the psychology of it, you're never gonna be able to do this job. We just
Right.
take the photos and let other people ask the questions,
Right. Exactly.
and
That's like a
so
direct quote from her.
pretty much, yeah. I was gonna start the whole conversation off just by saying 2 words, Jesse Plemons. I mean, this guy scares the out of me in so many roles that he plays, and here's a part that he wasn't even supposed to be playing.
Mhm.
So they
And he is married to Kirsten Dunst in real life.
and we've talked about them on the show before.
Yes. We're both
Um,
fans.
both huge fans, both great actors.
Yes.
Very, very talented artists, and they're big fans of each other. If you ever see interviews with them, they're very genuinely in love and fans of each other and each other's work, and
Mhm.
which is kind of
I believe they met on there's a show I tried to get you to watch, I think on Netflix called Black Mirrors. I think that's where they met. They
no,
were
they
on
met no, they met on Fargo,
Oh, was it Fargo?
and then they got together sometime after that. So
Okay.
they sort of had this, and this is coming from Kirsten herself.
Okay.
They had this kind of immediate chemistry,
Mhm.
creatively at least, this kind of creative love, and I think very shortly after that they got together. So,
And they're
um,
they're one of those couples I root for. It's
yeah,
like I hope, they
yeah,
survive
right, right,
the
yeah, it's tough,
Hollywood
tough
scene.
to do in Hollywood, but
Yeah,
there's another actor that was cast to play the part that Jesse Plemons ends up
I didn't
playing.
know that.
He drops out due to some scheduling challenges.
Mhm.
Jesse is there in Atlanta, I think, at the time with Kirsten and their family. They're together. So
Okay.
she goes to Alex and is like,
He can
"Jesse's
do it.
here." Yeah.
Yeah.
So he reads the script, loves it, of course, and the rest is history. And now, when you see the film, you'd be hard pressed to picture anybody else in that part. And
No.
it's relatively brief,
It's way, way too
but
brief.
it is the pivot point in this film.
Yeah.
The film, it it gets progressively more and more tense,
Mhm.
as they get closer and closer to their destination. The
Although, along the way, there's a few light moments, like when they
Mhm.
stop in this seemingly
Correct.
normal rural town that hasn't changed, and they go into a clothing store, and
That's
they,
right.
have
It
this
was
engagement with the clerk.
it's like they stumbled into this utopia
Right,
in the
yet
midst of all this craziness.
Kirsten comes out and says to Sammy Lee says to Sammy, "Wow, I feel like what it used to be like." And he says, "Well, take a look on the roofs, be subtle." And you realize there's snipers
And
up
the
on the roof.
camera just does this great Garland does this great, he just pulls
Yeah,
back,
yeah,
and then you s it there and it's blurred out, but you see 2 figures on the roof, like you
yeah,
said, and that you can tell they've got, weapons in their hand. That scene you just mentioned, what I wrote down the line,
mhm.
she says to Sammy, "It's like everything I'd forgotten," and then he
Right,
says, "It's like everything I remembered,"
yes.
and I just
One
thought it
of
was interesting.
the best interactions.
Yeah, the acting was fantastic.
Totally
All the
agree.
performances were great.
Kirsten Dunst, I remember her the first time I saw her was a film called Crazy Beautiful, and that's not counting her child kind of acting roles like Interview with a Vampire and
Oh, right, right.
where she was literally a kid,
Mhm,
and she's now at a point where I love this version of her. Like,
mhm.
when she was younger, she couldn't have played this role.
No, of
But
course not.
now in the first look, I thought Jesse Plemons was the star
Mhm.
and Kirsten was kind of like just an add-in,
And I told you,
but
I said, "No, she's like the central
she's
character."
the central figure and
Right.
she anchors the whole film.
Now you mentioned they stumbled in this utopian town, and then there's another moment where they're driving down this road, and there's all these Christmas decorations
Yeah,
lining the road. You know, when you drive through, like, a light show at Christmas in a
yeah,
neighborhood, and, it's shortly after that that things start to change, which is why I said that Plemons scene with Jesse Plemons, you know, you mentioned before that there's some light scenes and such, really
mhm.
just to throw you off the scent of what was really to come, which
And
is
you can sense
horrifying.
when they come across this Christmas shop and they're debating whether to drive into, like you say, it's like
It's
in
got
San
this big banner
Diego.
across this winter wonderland,
Right, in
and
San
there's, you
Diego,
know,
they used to horse racing track in the winter, they put a bunch of Christmas lights and you can drive through and around. That's what this is like.
yeah, same thing.
So they're debating on whether or not to drive in, and you can kinda sense that this is gonna go bad.
Yeah, and this is what I don't wanna spoil it, so I don't wanna give away too many details of those scenes and things that we're talking about, but, um, that's yeah, really things turn, and it just keeps getting more and more tense,
Yeah.
and it's frightening at times. It's kinda terrifying what you're
And
witnessing on
we're
screen.
non-political, we don't care what side you're on, and we don't talk about politics. It's hard not to kinda reflect on modern day with this movie,
Right.
and in my brain, there's a civil war going on whether or not this film is good or not. Like you said, the acting is top notch. Every character I liked. The story, not so much. You know, we don't get the build up and it falls short in my the whole ending sequence, which we won't talk about, falls way
We
short
don't get
of
the build what do you mean we don't get the build up? I don't understand that.
well, like as I mentioned in the synopsis, we're in the Civil War. We don't know
Right,
what led to it.
right,
We kinda can sense it. The president is in his 3rd term, you know.
right, the subtle right,
Right,
right.
little things are that happened, but we're thrust right into the Civil War.
See, that's what I like, and honestly, that's to me, that's good art, right? Leave it to me to fill in those blanks. I don't necessarily always wanna be fed all of
Right,
the other details. I think that's what made it even more intense because you're also, "Well, how did we get here?" And,
right.
you tell the story for yourself. The other thing too is I think it's done in such a way that this could really be anywhere. It's
Yeah,
certainly very US centric, but
correct.
it could be anywhere around the world. And I think at the end of the day, the story is more about the gig that these journalists sign up for
Yeah,
and what they stand and bear witness to doing that job than anything else. I think it was a big it was I think it was more about that
yeah,
than the atrocity and all the stuff that was going on
correct.
around it.
Yeah, if you leave out the politics, which is impossible, but if you leave out the politics and focus, like you say, on these, it's basically Kirsten Dunst and a younger version of herself
Mhm.
traveling, taking
Yeah.
photographs. And if you focus on that part of the story, I'm okay with it. But when it gets political, and I think the end is so kind of ridiculous,
I don't think
that
so.
see, I didn't buy it
See,
at
that's
all.
why yeah, but
And I
the
think it was a
have
terrible casting with Nick Offerman because I see him and I know he's a good dramatic actor. But
thank
when
you.
I first saw him, I'm like, I'm going to laugh
Yeah,
at
but
this.
you should be past that by now because of just his performance in The Last of Us, frankly.
Right.
Talk about being stripped down and vulnerable and all of that. And as you said, most people know him Parks and Rec and this comedic,
Right.
guy, but there's more tragedy and comedy than in anything else, I think, right?
That
So
actress, the young actress, Bad Times at the El Royale, which I'm trying to get you to watch. She
right,
was in that.
right. I thought she did a fantastic job in this
Yeah.
film. She held
The
her
acting
own. She's very
the
talented.
acting's top notch, no
Yeah.
doubt.
Now, the other thing though too is I'm not sure if you're aware, they filmed this in order.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
I didn't know that.
they were experiencing the events and as they unraveled just as we were on screen.
Right. Now,
Um,
do you think Garland wrote this as a kind of warning of where we're at right now politically and where we could go? Or do you think this is just because, it is sci-fi if you think about it, right? Because we're seeing a version of the future. So whenever you're dealing with futuristic, and there's no gadgets or anything,
no,
they don't go ridiculous,
but that's the
but
difference here. That future isn't that it's not that far outside the realm of possibility given the things that we have experienced in this country. We
yes,
can't speak to experiences in other countries and parts of the world, but here we can.
right.
And I think given what we've literally seen in real life, yeah, I could see this playing out the way that it did. I
Yeah.
really can.
I think it was a great idea, but I think there's something just missing for me.
I get it. Now let me ask you, had that been a different casting, would that you think that would change? It's hard to say, but do you think that would
Which
change
person?
the
Oh,
president, Nick Offerman?
Offerman? No, no,
Okay. You just
because
had trouble with that
I
story and
had
how it
trouble
played
with
out.
that,
Okay.
and the
Eh,
ending of a president so vulnerable, let me just say it that way, was kinda silly. That
to
would
have a
never
president.
happen. The ending would never happen in real life.
Go back to Superman 2. I mean, I remember that president remember the Reagan kind of look-alike, and
Yeah,
you remember Zod
that's
comes
right.
in and
Somebody
made him
tried to
look like
step in
a
and act like they were president.
correct. But
Yeah,
ultimately, I guess I should say he did step forward and say he was
right.
president. So,
That was somebody
um,
famous, wasn't it? No.
I don't think that played the
No,
president, but
maybe not.
Zod, of course, we know who played
Terrence Stamp,
the great Terrence Stamp. Yeah,
phenomenal actor.
kneel before Zod. So, I thought it was really good. I'd highly recommend it.
I
You
fall
know, it
way short there.
wow, how the hell do you fall short there? I mean,
Yeah.
the 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 sequence, they call it like the car swap scene, right? There's a scene where
Yes, yes.
there's 2 different vehicles, one with all the photojournalists and one with a couple of friends of um, uh, Wagner, Moura.
Mhm.
In fact, I should have his character's name, Joel. Um, a couple of friends of his, and they're kind of like side by side, and they're being very reckless and speeding, and one of the passenger and the other, this guy Tony, crawls into their car while they're driving,
While they're
speeding,
speeding, yeah.
and then Jesse does. She says, "I'm going to do it," and she goes into the car. A very
Right,
dangerous sequence that they filmed.
right.
It turns out too. I learned from an interview with Garland that Wagner had got COVID, and so they had to shoot around all of that
Oh,
and then
wow.
go and do some pickups, some reshoots with him once he got past that. So
Okay.
it was a very challenging sequence to film.
Especially if you're going chronologically and you
Correct.
lose a character.
Not to mention all how they rig these cars with like 19 cameras, every angle over the
Right.
shoulder, and how they do that now. Kirsten talked about it because she even said this is going to be an editing nightmare. Which Jake Roberts was the editor on this, by the way. Little credit to him because it was a edited. The way they can take that stuff out in post, with
Right.
technology today is pretty crazy. But I'm amazed that it falls very short for you.
Yeah. And
Wow.
again, it's definitely like the sequence with Jesse Plemons is just so good.
Yeah, let's not spoil that one.
Right. It's so good. If the whole movie was at that level of tension and story, I'd be
Which
all in.
which I think it is. I think that's the moment that it just goes up and up and up because of at that point they're more than halfway to DC and things
Right.
just get even more intense. You got the military involved and all these different, military forces that are
And meanwhile, in the Midwest, they're just choosing to
meanwhile,
ignore
yeah.
the news. Well, we don't
Now
watch the TVs because,
that was okay, if there's one thing I struggled with, it was that.
yeah,
Because, as you mentioned, they stumble into this town that seems, like, untouched by all of this.
correct.
They go into this thrift store, and the girl behind the counter is just like Joel is like, "There's a pretty
There's a
big
civil war
civil
going
war
on.
going on." She's like, "Yeah, we just, choose not to," like you
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
That was a little bit, silly to me. Yeah. So, but other than that,
And the
I bought
ending,
in. I gotta say, the military, the way that I gotta believe, well, obviously they have consultants on the film, so,
mhm,
but I just thought the tactical part of that was fascinating to watch because I could imagine that's how it'd be playing out. Think about it. We just talked about this film the other day, Taps,
right,
the great movie Taps from 1981. Very underrated film.
where the students take over the
Sh
compound.
Sean Penn, Tom Cruise, the cast is
Well, yeah, it's
phenomenal.
Timothy Hutton.
And as I told you, a very, very prepubescent almost Giancarlo Esposito is in that
Right.
film.
You
Look it up,
you sent me
folks.
a picture and I
Yeah,
I just laughed.
look it up. He's like in junior high school. That was a similar thing there,
Yeah,
where the kids take over the military school. And I mean,
yeah.
that was
This
just as believable to
I
me.
think the story was a little tighter and stronger. The
That's fair.
acting, I that's why I'm having the Civil War in my brain because it was
Yeah,
so well acted.
that's fair.
I
I mean,
want to praise it, but I can't recommend it because of and we're not gonna go into the ending. The ending is just
you wouldn't
so
recommend it? You wouldn't even recommend it as a streamer? I don't
as a
know.
streamer, if you've got it on Max or
I would.
whatever, it just came out on 4K.
So let me ask, we always bring up the ratings on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. So Metascore 75.
Yeah, I'm lower than that.
Okay.
I'm
Rotten
probably
Tomatoes,
between a 6 and a 7.
Rotten Tomatoes critics 81, audience as of this recording 70%, which I think is
That
low. I think it's
that's
low.
odd.
I think it's
That's
low.
odd that the and again, I don't give much credence to Rotten
But
Tomatoes.
I think even as neutral as this film I believe is,
Yeah.
I believe I think Garland
Well,
achieved that.
I think
I wonder if people went into it with their own leanings one way or
I
the
think
other,
so.
and
I think so.
because it may not have paid off for whatever side of that argument you're on,
Correct.
maybe that's why we have a 70% by the audience, I don't know.
Well, I think there's
Interesting.
people that are watching this that are, MSNBC people, and I think people are watching it that are
Fox
Fox
did.
News people, and they
Sure.
see it. I think you can see what you wanna see.
I agree with that. I agree with that,
So,
and it's like, well, one person's gonna see ethnic cleansing, and the other person's gonna be like, "Oh, it's a cool war film," something,
right, but,
you know?
the amount of guns
Mhm.
and again, this is not so crazy to that's not a far-fetched dystopian,
Right.
fiction. That's like reality. I
I'm
mean,
I'm trying to find because we mentioned even the most, innate, uh, mundane sort of, characters in the film, the performance was just great.
yeah,
And one I wanted to call out, that I picked up on, and I'm pretty sure that I'm correct. Let me just make sure that, oh, interesting. Okay, see, a lot of these people had worked with Garland before.
yeah, and
Um,
Danny Boyle, I think, is an executive producer. He did Train Spotting. He did Slumdog Millionaire. He won the Academy Award. directing that.
There's a film I still haven't seen. You believe it?
Wow, and
That's terrible.
Garland and him are like they were like a team.
Now, I'm probably not gonna say her name right, but she plays one of the, press, and her
Mhm,
character comes in at the towards the very end of the film.
mhm.
Kirsten and Joel are talking to her, so they know each other. She's in
Yeah,
fatigues, but she's got the big press pass on her.
yeah,
Her character's name was Anya, and I don't know if you recognized her at all. And again, a very small part, but it
mhm.
was is very well performed. Her name is Sonoya Mizuno. And again, I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly. She was in Ex Machina. She was in La La Land, but she's been recently in House of the Dragon playing Massaria.
But
So
I
she was.
didn't recognize her in this.
I
I don't
recognize
even
her
I'm like, "Okay, what's he
at
talking
the
about?"
very end. They were at this camp,
Yeah,
and Kirsten and Joel. Remember, he's telling them about some of the things that have occurred,
mhm,
and it's them and two other journalists that are in fatigues, and she's
right,
one of them. But
right.
I recognized the accent right away, and then looking at her, I'm like, "Is that the girl?" And I think she had glasses on too. But anyways,
Okay,
it was
yeah.
a good performance, and I just wanted to call her out because she's, in House of the Dragon right now, and she's great in that. She's great
Yeah,
in
oh,
that.
yeah, she's phenomenal.
Hey, you sure didn't pick up on this, but back in 2005,
Mhm,
Bruce Springsteen, both fans, I've been a fan since, you turned me on when I was 8 years old. Uh, on his 2005 tour, which was called Devils and Dust, he was
mhm.
touring on that album. He would end every single show of that tour with a song that he would start off playing on like a harpsichord type keyboard or something.
Land of
And
Hope and Dreams?
no, no,
Oh,
no,
no.
and then um, he would just go to the center stage and be singing pretty much a cappella,
Mhm.
and it's a song called "Dream Baby Dream." It wasn't one of his songs.
Oh, okay.
It's by a group named Suicide,
Right.
and that's the song that ends the movie. I thought that was pretty
Okay.
wild, the
The
version from
music
Suicide.
I thought the music was good
It's
through
good.
the movie and the tension. The score
Yeah.
was really good. Again, so well acted. I wanna say better things about it. If the
Honestly,
movie had all the energy of that Jesse Plemons sequence,
yeah.
it would have been in the theater a lot longer.
I almost go out and say it's worth watching just for that. And not just his performance, that's an ensemble performance that is very
It
well
is. It is. It's
acted,
not just him.
and Garland filmed that. They were like 100 year no, no, no. They were a far away
Mhm.
intentionally, and they shot with long lenses because they
Okay.
didn't wanna interrupt the kind of vibe that was going on.
They
Well, let's just
eventually get
say.
really
Well,
close,
but
but
they're zooming in and whatnot,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And yeah, and I'm
yeah,
sure at some point they come in closer, but
yeah.
most of that was shot with long lenses, and, um,
It
it's
was
just
well
he's a
shot.
spec
I rewound it to
say
watch that sequence again
oof.
because
I don't know if
I
I could
wasn't
watch
ready to
it
keep
again.
going. I just thought that was such a strong sequence.
It's just so powerful. It's so
Yeah,
powerful. He is but again, it's so well performed by every actor in the frame.
yeah.
Everyone, even, there's a couple of other more ancillary
Ancillary.
characters,
Yeah,
but just fantastic.
yeah,
That's one where I'm sure it's emotionally draining, but you wanna be part of that as an actor, I gotta believe. That's a
yeah,
dream scene for a
yeah.
lot of actors. Well, here we are. I did not think we were gonna be split. Now, this is a film I've wanted to watch since around it came out, but,
Right.
we're just getting around to it now, and I enjoyed it,
Yes.
but I definitely recommend it.
I'm a fan of Garland, but none of his films rate really high. I think
Mm,
he was nominated for writing for Ex Machina, and I that was another film that could have been so good, and think about it, I don't know what year that was, maybe 2015, and to think about how he incorporated AI into that film, he
mhm.
was way ahead of the curve.
Way out of the curve, yeah.
But there was something about the story in the end that just didn't tighten things up, and that's what I see in Civil War. Kind of the
So
same thing.
you're saying he's a bit of an M. Night
No,
Shyamalan
no,
then?
I wouldn't say that because I enjoy his films, and the big announcement
Yeah,
28 years later is coming. For people who know 28 Days Later, Cillian Murphy was the star of that, and that was basically a zombie movie, an
right.
apocalyptic zombie movie, and then the sequel was 28 weeks later, and now we're gonna get 28 years later with Danny Boyle and Garland, and it's gonna be a trilogy.
Well, that would make it a trilogy.
No, but the 28 years later on its own is gonna be a
Oh,
trilogy, and Cillian Murphy is coming back as the character he played in 28
yeah, but
Days.
the most that Garland's involvement will be with that, I think, is just maybe co-directing because
Right.
he's on record saying he's done with directing. He wants to
Yeah.
really just step back and I guess focus on
Be a
writing.
writer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's a very good writer.
And he's
Good
him
film.
and Boyle are partners in a producing team, and they produce
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
films.
Well, there you go, folks. Split
I'm glad you
decision
liked it.
again.
I
I
wasn't sure
did.
where you'd fall.
I did, but I
I
take your points. I mean, I they're fair points. The casting offer, I get that because it's borderline Jack Black as the president, but not quite
Yeah.
that silly. But
Yeah.
because again, I think Nick has established himself as someone who has very good dramatic chops, like you
Right.
said.
Right.
But I can see where it's a little, you got to suspend even more disbelief
Right.
because it's hard to get him out of your head as that
And at
comical
the end,
character.
it wasn't necessarily him. It was the way they portrayed the White
Yeah,
House,
yeah,
and, it just
right.
wasn't grounded in reality like a lot of the film was. And the last thing I wanna point out is I really liked Garland's use of still photography,
That was
which
great.
was really important because that's
Mhm.
what they were still photo
Yeah.
journalists.
It made me
And
wanna dust off my, 35
yeah,
millimeter, start
and there's
taking pictures.
so much that can be said in a photograph. A
Mhm,
lot sometimes you can capture more in a photograph than like, when you're watching video, you see everything, where
mhm,
a photograph, you get to fill in, and I
mhm.
think you mentioned that during the review is you filled in a lot of the background on
Right.
how they got to this point,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think anybody watching this is probably gonna see it through their political lens.
yeah. I thought it was gonna be a little slower because of the way that it started out, that
Mhm.
first 20, 30 minutes maybe, but no, then for me, it just and again, after the Plemons sequence, I was just it was riveting
I
to
will
me.
say I wasn't bored through it like
Yeah,
a recent movie I saw in the theater, but, I don't know, I just wish it had a tighter
yeah.
story at the end.
Yeah, hard to argue with the so again, split decision, but
Yeah,
I see where you're coming from with your point. So well,
yeah,
there you folks. I don't know. What do you do with that? It's
right. Well, you watch it
there's
and
a
you make up your own
there's
mind.
a civil war going on right here between two brothers. So there you go. But anything else to say about Civil War?
No, if you do see it or you have seen it,
Yeah.
drop us a comment.
Yeah,
Let
let
us
us know
know
your
what you
thoughts.
think. Where did you land?